They say the 4th of July is about independence, freedom, and celebrating what makes America great. For 18 years, it had been our favorite holiday, the one day when Mark and I would put aside our busy lives, invite everyone we loved to our backyard, and watch fireworks light up the summer sky while our children ran around with sparklers and our friends shared stories over cold beer and barbecue. This year was supposed to be extra special. Mark had been planning for weeks, more excited about our annual 4th of July party than I'd seen him in years. He insisted on handling every detail himself, from the decorations to the guest list, saying he wanted to give me the perfect celebration. But when I accidentally discovered the real reason behind his enthusiasm, I realized that the fireworks weren't the only thing about to explode that night. The secret I uncovered didn't just shatter my marriage. It turned our most patriotic tradition into the stage for the most devastating betrayal of my life. And by the time the last firework faded from the sky, everyone in our small town would know that sometimes the biggest lies are hidden behind the brightest smiles. Mark and I had been together since college, married for 18 years with two beautiful children, Emma, 16, and Jake, 14. We lived in a charming colonial house in Millbrook, Connecticut, the kind of small town where everyone knows everyone and 4th of July celebrations are serious business. Our annual backyard party had become legendary in our neighborhood. Mark would spend days setting up string lights, arranging picnic tables, and preparing his famous dry rubbed ribs. I'd make my grandmother's potato salad and apple pie, and we'd invite 30 or 40 people, neighbors, coworkers, old friends, and family members who'd drive in from surrounding towns. The kids would run around with glow sticks and sparklers while the adults shared stories and cold drinks. When darkness fell, we'd all gather on our back deck to watch the town's fireworks display, which was perfectly visible from our elevated backyard. It was Norman Rockwell Americana at its finest, and I treasured those moments of community and tradition. This year, Mark's enthusiasm for the party seemed different, more intense, more focused. He started planning in early June, making lists and checking them obsessively. "I want this year to be really special," he told me one evening as he sat at our kitchen table with his laptop researching party supplies. "I feel like we've been going through the motions lately. This year I want to remind everyone why this celebration matters." I was touched by his dedication. Mark worked long hours as a regional sales manager for a medical device company, and he'd been under a lot of stress lately with new territory expansions and demanding clients. Seeing him excited about something personal felt like a return to the man I'd fallen in love with. "What's gotten into you?" I asked, massaging his shoulders as he typed. "Not that I'm complaining, but you're acting like this is our wedding reception." Mark reached up and squeezed my hand. "Maybe I just want to show my wife how much I appreciate everything she does for our family. You deserve a perfect party where you can just relax and enjoy yourself." His words made my heart flutter the way they had when we were dating. After 18 years of marriage, it was easy to take each other for granted, to let romance get buried under mortgages and parent-teacher conferences and the daily grind of middle-aged life. Mark's renewed attention felt like a gift, and I threw myself into supporting his party planning with enthusiasm I hadn't felt in years. He insisted on handling the guest list himself, saying he wanted to surprise me with some people we hadn't seen in a while. He took charge of all the decorations, spending weekends at craft stores and party supply shops, coming home with bags full of red, white, and blue streamers, tablecloths, and centerpieces. "You're going overboard," I teased him as he hung the 4th string of patriotic bunting across our back porch. "There's no such thing as too much patriotism," Mark replied with a grin. "Besides, I want our neighbors to know that the Hendersons throw the best 4th of July party in Millbrook." Mark even arranged for a local band, 3 guys from his softball league who played classic rock covers, to perform in our backyard before the fireworks started. He rented a small stage, professional sound equipment, and enough seating for everyone. "Mark, this is getting expensive," I worried as delivery trucks brought folding chairs and tables to our house. "We don't need all this." "Don't worry about the money," Mark said, waving off my concerns. "I got a big bonus last quarter and I want to spend it on something that will make memories for our family." I hadn't known about any bonus, but Mark sometimes forgot to mention work details. I was just happy to see him so engaged and excited about something we were doing together. The only thing that struck me as odd was how secretive Mark was about certain aspects of the planning. When I offered to help with the invitations, he said he'd already sent them all via email. When I asked to see the guest list, he said it was a surprise. and that I'd see everyone when they arrived. I want you to be genuinely surprised and delighted, he explained. Trust me, it's going to be amazing. Mark also started making mysterious phone calls, usually stepping outside or going into his home office and closing the door. When I asked who he was talking to, he'd say it was party vendors, or surprise guests confirming their attendance. You're being very secretive about this party, I observed one evening after he'd spent an hour on the phone in the garage. I'm just trying to coordinate a lot of moving parts, Mark replied. You know how I am about details. I want everything to be perfect. I did know how Mark was about details. He was the kind of person who planned our family vacations with military precision, researching restaurants and attractions months in advance. His attention to detail was one of the things I'd always loved about him. But as the 4th of July approached, Mark's behavior became increasingly strange. He seemed nervous and distracted, checking his phone constantly and jumping whenever it buzzed with notifications. Are you okay? I asked him the week before the party. You seem really stressed for someone who's supposed to be excited about celebrating. I'm fine, Mark said quickly. Just want everything to go smoothly. There's a lot riding on this party. Riding on it? Mark, it's a backyard barbecue, not a corporate presentation. I know. I want it to be memorable. The morning of July 4th, Mark was up before dawn, bustling around the house and yard making final preparations. He'd taken the entire week off work, which was unusual for him, claiming he needed the time to execute his vision properly. Why don't you go get your hair done? Mark suggested as I was setting up the buffet table. And maybe get a manicure, buy yourself a new outfit. I want you to look and feel amazing tonight. Mark, I don't need. Please, he interrupted, pulling out his wallet and handing me his credit card. Do this for me. Get pampered, take your time, enjoy yourself. I've got everything under control here. There was something almost desperate in his voice, like he really needed me to leave the house for several hours. I assumed he was setting up some kind of surprise, maybe a special gift or decoration he wanted to keep secret until the party. Okay, I agreed, kissing his cheek. But don't overdo it while I'm gone. Save some energy for tonight. I spent the afternoon at my favorite salon, getting my hair styled and my nails done, then stopped at the mall to buy a new sundress, something patriotic and festive in red, white, and blue. It felt good to pamper myself, and I was touched that Mark had thought to give me this time to prepare. When I returned home around 4 o'clock, I was surprised to find Mark's car gone from the driveway. The backyard was beautifully decorated and ready for the party, but the house was empty. I called Mark's cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail. I assumed he was out picking up last-minute supplies or maybe collecting the band equipment. I went upstairs to shower and change into my new dress, feeling excited about the evening ahead. Mark's enthusiasm had been contagious, and I was looking forward to seeing which friends and family members he'd invited as surprises. As I was getting dressed, I heard Mark's car pull into the driveway. I looked out our bedroom window and saw him getting out of the passenger side of his own car. Someone else was driving, a woman with long blonde hair who I didn't immediately recognize. The woman stayed in the car while Mark hurried toward the house, but as she turned to back out of the driveway, I got a clear look at her face. It was Jessica Morrison, my best friend since high school. My stomach dropped. Why would Jessica be driving Mark's car? And why hadn't she come inside to say hello? I heard Mark come through the front door calling out, "Honey, I'm back. How was your afternoon?" "It was great," I called back, trying to keep my voice normal while my mind raced with questions. "I saw Jessica dropping you off. Is everything okay with your car?" There was a pause before Mark answered. "Oh yeah, I ran into Jessica at the grocery store and my car wouldn't start. He gave me a ride home. No big deal." But Mark's car had started fine when he left that morning, and I'd just seen Jessica driving it perfectly well. Why would he lie about something so simple? I finished getting dressed and went downstairs, where Mark was bustling around the kitchen, putting finishing touches on his barbecue sauce and checking items off his endless lists. "You look beautiful," he said, giving me a quick kiss. "That dress is perfect." "Thanks. So Jessica's coming to the party tonight." "Of course. She wouldn't miss it." "I'm surprised she didn't come in to say hi when she dropped you off." Mark's hands stilled for just a moment as he stirred his sauce. "She was in a hurry. Had to get home to get ready." Something about his tone felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on what. Mark and Jessica had always been friendly, She'd been my maid of honor at our wedding, and her ex-husband Dave had been Mark's best man. After Jessica's divorce 3 years ago, she'd become even more integrated into our social circle, joining us for dinners and family gatherings. But lately, I'd noticed that Jessica seemed to find excuses to stop by our house when Mark was home, and she always seemed particularly interested in his work stories and opinions. I'd chalked it up to her being lonely after her divorce and appreciating male friendship. Now, seeing them together in his car, I wondered if there was something more to their relationship. Guests started arriving around 5 o'clock, and I was genuinely surprised by some of the people Mark had invited. There were neighbors I hadn't seen in months, co-workers from both of our jobs, and several couples from our college days who'd driven up from New York City. "Mark, this is incredible," I told him as I hugged old friends and caught up with people I hadn't seen in years. "How did you coordinate all of this?" "I told you I wanted it to be special," Mark replied, but he seemed distracted, constantly checking his phone and scanning the crowd as if he was looking for someone specific. Jessica arrived around 6 o'clock, wearing a stunning red sundress that showed off her figure perfectly. She'd always been beautiful, but tonight she seemed to glow with an energy I hadn't seen since before her divorce. "Sarah, you look amazing." Jessica hugged me tightly. "And Mark, this party is incredible. You've really outdone yourself." "Thanks, Jess," Mark replied, and I noticed that his hug with Jessica lasted just a beat longer than it should have. As the evening progressed, I found myself watching Mark and Jessica more closely. They weren't obviously flirting or spending excessive time together, but there was something in the way they looked at each other, the way they seemed to be communicating without words. When Jessica laughed at Mark's jokes, her hand would briefly touch his arm. When Mark was telling a story to a group of people, his eyes would find Jessica in the crowd and linger on her face. They had the subtle intimacy of people who shared secrets. Around 8 o'clock, as the sun was setting and people were gathering on the deck to wait for the fireworks, I went inside to get more drinks from the refrigerator. Mark's phone was sitting on the kitchen counter, and as I walked past it, the screen lit up with a text message. The message was from Jessica, and the preview showed enough to make my blood run cold. "Can't wait for tonight. This is going to be perfect. I love you." My hands started shaking as I stared at the phone. "I love you." Jessica had texted, "I love you," to my husband. I looked around frantically, making sure no one was watching, then picked up Mark's phone. It wasn't locked. He'd never been secretive about his phone before, which now seemed like calculated misdirection rather than openness. I opened his text conversation with Jessica, and what I found made me feel like the ground was falling away beneath my feet. The messages went back months, maybe longer. They started innocuously enough, Jessica asking Mark for advice about home repairs, Mark offering to help with tasks around her house. But gradually the tone became more intimate, more personal. "Thank you for being there for me during the divorce. I don't know what I would have done without you. You deserve so much better than Dave ever gave you. I feel like you really understand me in a way that no one else does. I've been thinking about our conversation last night. You're right that we can't keep pretending these feelings don't exist. I know this is complicated, but I can't stop thinking about you. Being with you feels like coming home." The messages became increasingly explicit, with references to secret meetings, stolen moments, and plans for a future together. They talked about how guilty they felt about deceiving me, but also about how right their relationship felt. But the most devastating messages were the recent ones, discussing their plans for tonight's party. "I can't believe we're going to tell everyone tonight," Jessica had written 2 days ago. "I know it's going to hurt Sarah, but we can't keep living this lie," Mark had replied. "Do you really think the 4th of July party is the right time? It's perfect. Everyone we care about will be there. We can tell them together as a united front. And then we can finally stop hiding. I'm scared, but I'm also excited. I love you so much, Mark. I love you too. After tonight, we can finally be together openly." I dropped the phone like it was on fire, my whole body shaking with shock and rage. Mark and Jessica weren't just having an affair. They were planning to announce it publicly at our 4th of July party, in front of our children, our friends, our neighbors, everyone we knew. They were going to humiliate me in the most public way possible, turning our most cherished family tradition into the stage for their betrayal. I stood in my kitchen, surrounded by the sounds of laughter and conversation from our backyard, trying to process what I'd just learned. My husband of 18 years and my best friend since high school had been carrying on an affair behind my back, And they'd planned to use our own party, the party Mark had insisted on making perfect, to destroy my life in front of everyone I cared about. The elaborate planning, the mysterious phone calls, the insistence that I leave the house that afternoon, it had all been about coordinating their public betrayal. Mark hadn't been planning a celebration of our marriage and family. He'd been planning its funeral. But as I stood there shaking with hurt and rage, I realized something important. I had information they didn't know I had. They thought they were going to surprise me with their announcement, but instead I could surprise them. If Mark and Jessica wanted to use our 4th of July party as the stage for their betrayal, then I would use it as the stage for their exposure. I spent the next hour moving through the party like an actress playing a role, smiling and chatting with guests while my mind raced with plans. I watched Mark and Jessica interact, seeing their secret glances and hidden touches with new eyes. They were both nervous, I realized. Mark kept checking his watch and looking toward the area where the fireworks would be visible. Jessica kept smoothing her dress and touching her hair, the way she did when she was anxious about something important. They were waiting for the right moment to make their announcement, probably during or right after the fireworks when everyone would be gathered together and emotional about the patriotic display. "Sarah, are you okay?" asked my neighbor Linda, touching my arm with concern. "You seem a little distracted." "I'm fine," I replied with a smile that felt like it might crack my face. "Just making sure everything's perfect for the fireworks." Around 9:30, the first fireworks began exploding in the distance, and everyone gathered on our back deck to watch the show. Mark positioned himself near the railing where everyone could see him, and Jessica stood nearby, both of them looking nervous but determined. I realized this was it. They were going to make their announcement during the fireworks, when everyone was already emotional and gathered together. But I had other plans. As the fireworks reached their crescendo with red, white, and blue explosions lighting up the sky and everyone oohing and awing in appreciation, I stepped forward and raised my voice. "Everyone, can I have your attention for a moment?" The crowd turned toward me, their faces illuminated by the colorful lights in the sky. Mark and Jessica both looked surprised. This wasn't part of their plan. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," I continued, my voice carrying clearly over the sounds of the fireworks. "This 4th of July party has always been about celebrating the things that matter most: family, friendship, and the values that make our community strong." People nodded and smiled, thinking I was just giving a heartfelt toast. "Values like honesty, loyalty, and keeping the promises we make to the people we love," I continued, my eyes finding Mark's face in the crowd. His expression was shifting from confusion to alarm as he began to sense that something was wrong. "Unfortunately, I've recently discovered that not everyone here tonight shares those values." The crowd was getting quieter, sensing that this wasn't a typical party speech. "You see, I accidentally discovered something today that I think you all should know. It turns out that 2 people I trusted most in the world have been lying to me, to all of us, for months." Mark stepped forward, his face pale in the fireworks glow. "Sarah, what are you?" "I'm talking about my husband Mark and my best friend Jessica," I said loudly, cutting him off, "who have been having an affair behind my back and plan to announce it tonight at our own party in front of our children and friends." The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Gasps and shocked exclamations rippled through the crowd. Several people turned to stare at Mark and Jessica, who both looked like deer caught in headlights. "Sarah, please, let's talk about this privately," Mark started, but I wasn't finished. "Privately?" I laughed bitterly. "Like the private meetings you've been having for months? Like the private text messages where you plan to humiliate me publicly tonight?" I pulled out Mark's phone, which I'd retrieved from the kitchen. "Should I read some of these messages out loud? The ones where you talk about how guilty you feel about deceiving me, but how right your relationship feels?" "Mom, what's happening?" I heard Emma's voice from somewhere in the crowd, and my heart broke for my children, who were witnessing their family implode in the most public way possible. But I was too angry, too hurt, too betrayed to stop now. "Or maybe I should read the messages where you plan to use tonight's party to tell everyone about your affair. Where you talked about making this announcement during the fireworks so everyone would be gathered together." Jessica finally found her voice. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. We never meant for you to find out this way. You never meant for me to find out at all until you were ready to destroy my life on your terms," I shot back. "You were going to stand here in my backyard at the party my husband insisted on making perfect, and announce that you've been betraying me for months. The fireworks were still exploding overhead, but no one was watching them anymore. Everyone was staring at the three of us, witnessing the most dramatic confrontation our small town had probably ever seen. "How long?" I demanded, looking back and forth between Mark and Jessica. "How long has this been going on?" Mark and Jessica looked at each other, and in that glance, I saw the intimacy that I'd been blind to for months. "Since last Christmas," Mark said quietly. "It started at the Hendersons' holiday party. Last Christmas. 8 months. They'd been lying to me, deceiving me, making me feel like I was going crazy for noticing the subtle changes in their behavior for 8 months. And you," I turned to Jessica, "you've been coming to my house, eating my food, playing with my children, pretending to be my friend while you were sleeping with my husband." Jessica was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. "Sarah, I never wanted to hurt you. I tried to fight these feelings, but..." "But what?" "But you decided your feelings were more important than 18 years of marriage? More important than my children's family? More important than 25 years of friendship?" The crowd was completely silent now except for the continuing fireworks overhead. Even the band had stopped playing, sensing that something serious was happening. "I want you both to leave," I said, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. "Get out of my house, get off my property, and don't ever come back." "Sarah, please, we need to talk about this rationally," Mark started. "Rationally?" I screamed, all my composure finally breaking. "You want to talk rationally about how you plan to humiliate me in front of everyone I care about? How you used our family tradition as the backdrop for your betrayal?" "The kids," Mark said, looking around for Emma and Jake. "The kids will be fine," I said coldly. "They'll be better off knowing the truth about who their father really is than living with your lies." I turned to address the crowd of shocked guests. "I'm sorry you all had to witness this, but I wasn't going to let them control the narrative. I wasn't going to let them make me the fool who didn't see it coming." Some of our friends were crying. Others looked angry on my behalf. A few were already moving toward Mark and Jessica with expressions that suggested they wouldn't be welcome in this community much longer. "Sarah," Jessica tried one more time, "I know you hate me right now, but someday I hope you can understand." "Understand what?" I interrupted. "Understand that you're a selfish, lying, backstabbing woman who destroyed a family for your own gratification? I understand perfectly." Mark grabbed Jessica's hand, a gesture that would have been tender in other circumstances but now just looked pathetic and desperate. "We'll get our things and go," he said quietly. "Your things are already packed," I replied. "I put them in your car while everyone was watching the fireworks. Don't come back to this house unless it's to see the children, and even then call first." As Mark and Jessica made their way through the crowd of stunned guests, people stepped aside to let them pass, but no one spoke to them or offered support. They'd been exposed not just as adulterers, but as people who would use a community celebration to inflict maximum pain on someone they claimed to love. After they left, the party slowly began to break up. Some guests came to hug me and offer support. Others seemed uncomfortable and made quick excuses to leave. A few close friends stayed to help clean up and make sure I was okay. "Mom, are you all right?" Emma asked, appearing at my side with tears in her eyes. I pulled both my children close, holding them tight as the last of the fireworks faded from the sky. "I will be," I told them honestly. "It's going to be hard for a while, but we're going to be okay." Jake, my 14-year-old son who usually tried to act tough, was crying openly. "I can't believe Dad would do this to us." "I can't either," I admitted. "But sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to love most. That doesn't mean it's our fault, and it doesn't mean we're not worthy of love." The aftermath of that 4th of July was brutal. The story spread through our small town like wildfire, and I became the subject of both sympathy and gossip. Some people admired my courage in exposing the affair publicly. Others thought I should have handled it privately, that airing our family's problems in front of everyone was inappropriate. Mark moved in with Jessica immediately, confirming what everyone already suspected about the seriousness of their relationship. They tried to present themselves as a couple who had fallen in love despite their best efforts to resist, but the community wasn't buying it. The divorce proceedings were complicated and painful. Mark fought for custody of the children, but Emma and Jake both made it clear they wanted to live with me. They felt betrayed by their father's deception and weren't ready to accept Jessica as a part of their lives. The hardest part was losing not just my husband but my best friend. Jessica and I had shared everything for 25 years. First loves, college experiences, career struggles, marriage challenges, the joys and fears of motherhood. She'd been my maid of honor, my confidant, my sister in every way that mattered. Learning that she'd been capable of such betrayal made me question everything I thought I knew about human nature and relationships. But in the months that followed, I also discovered strength I didn't know I possessed. I'd spent 18 years defining myself primarily as Mark's wife and my children's mother. Suddenly, I had to figure out who Sarah was as an individual. I threw myself into my work as a marketing coordinator for a local nonprofit, eventually earning a promotion to director. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during my marriage. I started taking art classes and discovered a talent for watercolor painting. Most importantly, I learned to trust my instincts again. The subtle signs I'd noticed about Mark and Jessica's relationship, the lingering glances, the inside jokes, the way they seemed to communicate without words, hadn't been my imagination. I'd been seeing the truth, but I'd been trained by years of marriage to doubt myself rather than confront uncomfortable realities. Emma and Jake struggled with their father's betrayal, but they also grew stronger and more independent. Emma became fiercely protective of me and suspicious of anyone who tried to get close to our family. Jake channeled his anger into sports and academics, becoming more focused and driven than he'd ever been before. We created new traditions to replace the ones that had been tainted by Mark's deception. Instead of hosting a big 4th of July party, we started spending the holiday volunteering at a local veterans organization, serving meals and listening to stories from people who had actually sacrificed for the freedoms we were celebrating. It felt more meaningful than our old parties ever had. Mark and Jessica's relationship didn't last. Within a year, they'd broken up, apparently unable to sustain a romance that had been built on deception and betrayal. Mark tried to reconcile with me, claiming that his affair with Jessica had been a midlife crisis, and that he'd realized I was the only woman he'd ever truly loved. But trust, once broken, can't be easily repaired. I'd seen who Mark really was when he thought no one was watching, and I couldn't unsee it. Jessica also tried to apologize and rebuild our friendship, but I wasn't interested. Some betrayals are too deep, too calculated, too cruel to forgive. She'd made her choice when she decided her feelings were more important than my family's well-being. 3 years later, I'm in a much better place. I'm dating a wonderful man named Robert who treats me with the respect and honesty I should have demanded all along. Emma is thriving in college and Jake is a senior in high school with plans to study engineering. We still live in the same house, but it feels different now, lighter, more peaceful, more authentically ours. I've redecorated, removing reminders of my marriage to Mark and creating spaces that reflect who I am now rather than who I used to be. The 4th of July will never be the same for me. When I see fireworks, I don't think about patriotism and community and family traditions. I think about the night my life exploded along with the colorful lights in the sky. But I also think about the courage it took to stand up for myself, to refuse to be humiliated quietly, to demand better treatment than what I was being offered. That 4th of July taught me that sometimes the most patriotic thing you can do is declare your independence from people who don't value your worth. Sometimes you have to fight for your own freedom even when the battle takes place in your own backyard. Mark thought he could control the narrative of our marriage's end, that he could choose the time and place and manner of my humiliation. But I took that power away from him. I refused to be the victim of his story and instead became the hero of my own. The fireworks that night weren't just celebrating America's independence. They were celebrating mine. And while the explosion of my marriage was devastating, what grew from the ashes was something stronger, more authentic, and more valuable than what I'd lost. I learned that I didn't need Mark's love to be worthy of love. I didn't need Jessica's friendship to have meaningful relationships. I didn't need their approval or validation to know my own worth. The 4th of July used to be about celebrating what we had. Now it's about celebrating what we've overcome. And that's a tradition I can live with. What do you think about public confrontations versus private conversations when dealing with betrayal? Have you ever discovered a secret that changed everything about a relationship? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories of courage in the face of betrayal. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and remember, sometimes the most explosive revelations happen when you least expect them. Check out our next story about a woman who discovered her sister had been living a lie that put their entire family at risk.